Why did the Biden admin fight to reinstate Title 42 if they truly wanted to keep the border open and have people killed? Why did the Biden admin try to pass that bill that had been workshopped for so long by a Republican, Langford, in the Senate
Yeah.
for so long, just for, Trump to shut it?
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. So glad you are here for this one. So today we have got a 2-on-1 political showdown where two hosts are grilling a conservative commentator named Mike who is actually campaigning to be selected for the $1.776 billion anti-weaponization fund. And what starts as a debate about whether this fund has any legal precedent quickly spirals into Mike trying to argue that families of crimes committed by illegal immigrants should be compensated from this fund, and the hosts are not letting that slide. The back and forth on intent alone is worth the entire video. Trust me, you are going to want to stay for the full thing, because the way this conversation unfolds in the last few minutes is something you do not want to miss. Also drop a comment and let me know where you are tuning in from today. I always love seeing how far this community reaches, and it honestly makes my day reading through those. Alright, let us get right into it.
The easy question would be, what is the singular best example that you can think of that is the equivalent to what Trump wants to do with this slush fund that's ever been done in all of, I guess, U.S. history? What's your best example for how anything has ever been run like this before?
I'll answer the same question again for like the fourth time here. In my litany of examples, that's how the Democrats have run the federal government for a long time. So Obama had his huge settlement with the Native Americans, but did also go through a much lengthier, inexpensive process.
Settlement,
money
that was a
didn't go
case
to the
they
victims.
fought. That was at the end of the whole process. They won that case, and then that was the settlement that they
Right.
decided on. But the federal government fought that case.
All right,
That wasn't a settlement
let
created
Mike
by...
respond and flesh out that comparison to
Well,
the
that's
Obama
the worst
case.
comparison, though. But I'm saying that's
Okay,
the best.
I'll
That was
give
one
you
that was
a
listed
chance
on the
to
DOJ's
respond.
website. It's not
I'll
a
give
good...
you a chance to respond, but Mike, first, you continue. Please explain the Native
Yeah.
American example from the Obama administration.
So
how
the
it's a
People's
parallel.
Gate, that case is obviously being touted as DOJ as a precedent for this. But my point's more broad than it. It's like, yes, the settlement fund. This is a new or a major use. It's historic, right? Like there's no dodging that fact. And it's because there was historic amounts of misconduct and people harmed by it that the federal government needs to deal with and compensate them for the harms they did to it. And so there's not an apples to apples on the fund being used for some of the thing because the federal government hasn't done anything this bad in recent memory where you needed to do something like that. And so my example to how Democrats drive money, again, $4 billion plus to open borders, nonprofits out of DHS. And you can argue like, we live from CR to CR. There's no like civics ferry overseeing all this stuff. It was the Biden administration paying people to invade the border and ship them around town to hurt
Oh my
people.
God.
And those are the people I will make whole if I'm on the commission. I'm
Well, Mike,
solving for the harm.
let me ask you about that
Uh-huh.
because you mentioned that, and that's actually
Like how Abbott and Paxton have shipped over 120,000
Stephen, hang on,
illegals to
hang on,
other
hang
states
on.
as well, but okay.
So let me ask you about that because I'll just say that the Obama case involving the Native American settlement, that was a class action lawsuit that was settled where there were then parameters you had to meet. And people had to have legal claims. The problem with this fund is that even you don't actually have to have a lawsuit or a legal claim. It is not a judicial process. There's no judge overseeing any of it. It is just you apply for it, but it's not a lawsuit. Your claim can be past the statute of limitations. There's not any sort of certification about these payments from a judge. It is meaningfully different, though I take your point. Conservatives were very upset about the Obama thing at the time, and I probably agree with a lot of those criticisms. You mentioned immigration there, though. Are you suggesting that I feel horrible, to be clear, for families of crimes of illegal immigrants. I think it's terrible. Obviously, I agree there were massive problems with the border crisis under President Biden. But are you suggesting that if somebody whose family member was killed by an illegal immigrant in America, that then they're entitled to potential compensation from an anti-weaponization fund? How is the government directly weaponized against them? Illegal immigrants may have gotten worse at points under Biden, but illegal immigrants come and go into our country for decades.
Yeah, never like we saw during the Biden administration. So, like, as part of my pitch, and I'll be rolling out more on this, and I've posted this as one of my ideas, and I would be one of five. And so I wouldn't control the whole thing. I'd have to operate, of course, by the bounds set for me. But one of the ideas that I would advocate for, if it is allowable within the construct, so a lot of caveats there, but I'm for it. That's why I'm saying it, is that, understanding that the Biden administration Mayorkas, for which he was impeached, weaponized immigration laws for partisan and political ends. And what they did was awful. They ignored the law. They invited people over and they used improperly government money to pay nonprofits to help them do that. And it resulted in some people, yes, unfortunately dying and losing, family members and being harmed. And so I think that if we have a $1.776 billion fund, I will consider, claims to people like Lake and Riley's family. And yes, I do think they deserve to be compensated for the harm inflicted on them by the Biden administration.
This is where the whole argument completely falls apart. Because when you challenge someone to name one example in all of history where anything like this fund has been done before, and the best answer they have gets immediately destroyed, that tells you everything you need to know about how defensible this actually is. And here's what makes it even worse. Mike actually admitted it himself. He said this is historic, there is no dodging that fact, his own words. The person defending this fund is literally telling you that nothing like it has ever existed before. And somehow we are supposed to feel comfortable with that? If your strongest argument is, yeah, this is unprecedented, but just trust us, you have already lost the debate before it even started. Then the comparison to the Native American settlement comes up, and you have to understand what that actually was. That was a class action lawsuit. Real people filed real legal claims. There was judicial oversight. A judge certified every step of the process. It went through years of litigation the way the legal system is supposed to work. That is how government settlements have always functioned in this country. But what is being proposed here? The host broke it down perfectly when he said you do not actually have to have a lawsuit or a legal claim. It is not a judicial process. There is no judge overseeing any of it. You are talking about $1 billion fund with zero judicial oversight. No lawsuit needed. Your claim can be past the statute of limitations and you can still apply. In what world is that the same thing? It is not, and everybody watching knows it is not. And then Mike pivots to immigration and says he would consider claims to people like Lake and Riley's family and that they deserve to be compensated for harm. Now look, what happened to that family is heartbreaking, and nobody disputes that. But stretching a government weaponization fund to cover crimes committed by undocumented individuals? You are essentially arguing that whichever president happens to be in office when a crime occurs is directly and financially liable for it. That is not how legal accountability has ever worked in any framework this country has used.
So what's the distinction there between somebody whose family member was killed by an illegal immigrant who entered the country in 2018? They don't get any compensation from the fund under your thinking here. But somebody who was killed by an illegal immigrant in 2021, they're going to get compensated.
Intent.
What's the distinction?
Intent.
Intent?
Yeah, the Biden
You
administration
think
intended to open the border and intended and knew that it was foreseeable that more people would be hurt if they opened the border, and they shut down ICE knowing that they would have other harms, and so it's intent. You have, other administrations have at least tried, but the Biden administration, Mayorkas, opened the border and paid for it on purpose, and people got hurt and killed as a result. So yes, it's intent.
Why shouldn't families of people who were killed by illegal immigrants that entered in Trump 1 be entitled to compensation? Their member was still murdered by somebody who shouldn't have been allowed in the country, and it happened under President Trump's watch. It's the same to them. It's the same exact situation. The intent. First off, I don't believe, as terrible as his Biden policies were, he certainly didn't intend for people to be murdered. You would acknowledge that, no?
No, I think it was a foreseeable consequence of his actions.
You think Biden wanted people murdered?
Maybe not in the
Wait, did
particular,
Biden
but I
want the
think
two
when you're
National
looking-
Guardsmen murdered in
One-
D.C. for
one
the
question
illegal
at a time,
immigrant, the guy from
guys.
Afghanistan he let in 2018?
One question at a time as I answer compound questions. This is a fun 2 versus 1. I must be doing a good job because you guys keep asking the same questions again and again. So yes, and when you're making global decisions like this and looking at the pros and cons of a decision that's consequential, it's should we open the border and shut down ICE? On the con side are the harms that illegal aliens, can commit. So did he intend it in this specific? No, probably not. Of course not. I'm not accusing him of that. But was that the logical consequence of his decision for which he chose politics over public safety? Yes. And that's the intent I'm zeroing in on. That intent is different from other administrations that have at least tried. Okay. They weren't saying like just everyone come on in and shut down ICE and, screw everyone else who's here who has to deal with it. That's the difference. And also, this is a particular fund. Do I think generally people should be able to bring those types of claims against the government? I haven't thought about it that much. But for this fund, looking at this type of weaponization, the craziness of the Biden years, that's certainly not only something I would consider, but also support.
And this right here is the moment where the entire intent argument gets exposed for what it really is. Because the host asks the simplest question imaginable. If a family lost someone to a crime committed by an undocumented person who entered during 2018, they get nothing from this fund. But if the exact same tragedy happened in 2021, suddenly that family qualifies for compensation. Same crime, same heartbreak, same loss, but completely different outcomes depending on who was in office at the time. So what is the actual difference? And Mike's answer is intent. That is his entire framework. He said the previous administration intended to open the border. But here is where it gets really interesting, because the host presses him directly and asks, do you think the former president actually wanted people harmed? And watch what happens. Mike says no, probably not, of course not. I am not accusing him of that. Think about what just happened there. He walked right up to the line of accusing a former president of wanting Americans harmed, and then he was asked point blank, he completely ran away from it. That tells you even he knows that argument does not hold up under any real scrutiny. But he still wants the fund to operate as if it does. His entire case for why certain families deserve compensation rests on the idea of intent. And when he is pressed on it, he abandons it immediately. He cannot actually say there was intent to cause harm because even he knows that is absurd. So instead he pivots to saying it was a foreseeable consequence. But hold on, that is a completely different legal standard. And here is something people should actually understand because it matters. In legal terms, there's a massive difference between intent and foreseeability. Intent means you wanted the outcome to happen. Foreseeability just means you could have predicted it might happen. Every single administration in modern history has made policy decisions with foreseeable negative consequences. If that is the standard you want to use, then every president who has ever held office should be paying out of a fund like this. But Mike does not want to apply that standard evenly. He only wants it pointing in one direction. And that right there is what exposes this whole thing as a political weapon disguised as accountability.
Why did the Biden admin fight to reinstate Title 42 if they truly wanted to keep the border open and have people killed? Why did the Biden admin try to pass that bill that had been workshopped for so long by a Republican, Langford, in the Senate for so long, just for, Trump to shut it? This is like a deeply unserious argument, but I don't know how. Like the idea that that Biden intentionally wanted Americans killed by illegal immigrants, which, by the way, is probably like one of the worst things you could ever have as a president, especially when the Democrats are already seen as being softer on immigration. It doesn't even make sense.
That's their fault, though.
Biden didn't. What do you mean it's their fault?
They in 2020 they set themselves up to be perceived that way with their own statements.
Sure,
to be soft on immigration.
I don't even know how true that is. The biggest meme that was played from Kamala was her speaking at the podium. The "Do not come."
I was referring to 2020 though, when they go around all the presidential candidates and they say,
what sure, they might talk about being friendlier to illegal immigration or immigration or amnesty or whatever. Sure, but I'm just saying that
should we
the idea that
decriminalize border crossings? Should they all get free health care? It's their own fault they were perceived as soft on immigration, but not to derail you.
Yeah, the Republicans play a lot in maintaining the charades here, but also Biden didn't abolish ICE either. I don't even know where this comes from. Just none of these statements are even remotely true. They're all kind of goofy and unserious. I don't know I don't know how you would ever prove intent here. That did Donald Trump intend to murder Americans with his weird war in Iran, or did Donald Trump intend for people to die when he turned into a massive anti-vaxxer, and however many tens of thousands of conservatives died because now they don't want to get vaccinated because they're worried about turning into magnets? That's an insanely crazy thing to say.
And then comes the moment that just shuts everything down, because the host asks one simple question. If the previous administration truly wanted the border open and wanted people harmed, then why did they fight to reinstate Title 42? Why did they actively try to pass a bipartisan border security bill that had been worked on for months by a Republican senator, only for it to get killed from the other side? That question just sits there with no answer, and there is absolutely no comeback to it. Because think about what you are being asked to believe here. You are being asked to believe that an administration wanted chaos at the border, while at the same time they were fighting in court to keep restrictions in place. You cannot hold both of those positions. Either they wanted an open border, or they were trying to secure it. The fact that they pushed for enforcement tools and fought legal battles to maintain them tells you everything about what the actual intent was, and that completely demolishes the argument being made. And then the host drops another fact that people need to hear. ICE was never abolished. That talking point that gets repeated over and over and over again as if it is established truth, it is just flat out not true. ICE continued to operate the entire time. And when you look at what was actually happening on the ground versus what the narrative claims was happening, there's a canyon-sized gap between the two. The host said it perfectly. None of these statements are even remotely true. They are all goofy and unserious. But here is the part that really got me. Because the host then takes Mike's own intent framework and flips it directly back on him. He brings up military escalation in the Middle East and asks whether that was intended to harm Americans. And here is the thing. If you apply the exact same foreseeability standard that Mike was trying to use, that situation absolutely qualifies. Policy decisions were made that had clear foreseeable consequences for American service members and for stability in the entire region. So where's the fun for those people? Where's their compensation? The question just hung in the air because there is no good answer to it. And that is the core problem with this entire setup. It was never about justice. It was never about making people whole. It is about selectively choosing who gets to be called a victim based entirely on which side of the political aisle they sit on. The moment you start doing that, you are not running a compensation fund anymore. You are running a loyalty rewards program funded by taxpayer dollars. And everyone watching this could see right through it. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.